Welcome to the 2024-25 season at Geva Theatre. Thank you for watching our prologue for Mel Brooks' Young Frankenstein, directed and choreographed by Gerry McIntyre. My name is Fiona Kyle, and I'm the literary manager and artistic associate here at Geva. I'm guessing many of you have read or seen a film adaptation of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. For those who haven't, or those who want a refresher, let's start with a bit of background on Shelley and her famous novel. Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley was born in 1797 in London to philosopher William Godwin and feminist writer Mary Wollstonecraft, who penned A Vindication of the Rights of Women. Young Shelley grew up in an intellectual environment, and it's not surprising that she met and fell in love with poet Percy Bysshe Shelley in 1814. They married 2 years later in 1816, which is also when Shelley first conceived of Frankenstein, or the modern Prometheus. Shelley, along with her husband Percy, Lord Byron, and others, had challenged each other to write ghost stories. You can find out much more information about that in your program. Shelley's famous novel follows Victor Frankenstein, a young scientist obsessed with the idea of creating life. He succeeds in animating a creature made from assembled body parts, but upon seeing the horrible result, he is horrified and abandons it. The creature, abandoned and lonely, seeks acceptance, but is met with fear and rejection. This drives the monster to seek revenge. The narrative explores themes of ambition, the quest for knowledge, the nature of humanity, and the ethical implications of scientific advancement. It also explores themes of autonomy and challenges us to reflect on creation, responsibility, and the search for identity in a world that often denies agency to those deemed different. Let's keep those themes in mind as we take a quick detour into some film history. Before we talk about the classic Frankenstein films, we should be introduced to the visionary producer and founder of Universal Pictures, Carl Laemmle Jr. He was born in Germany in 1867, emigrated to America in 1884, began working in the film industry, and founded Universal Pictures in 1912. Laemmle played a crucial role in shaping early film, particularly the horror genre. As a producer, Laemmle recognized the potential of monster films, leading to the creation of the Universal Monsters franchise. His vision culminated in the production of classic horror films, starting with the silents, such as Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde and Phantom of the Opera with Lon Chaney, before expanding into talkies, starting with Dracula, followed by Frankenstein and The Mummy. You can find out more about those films on the big screen next to our box office. Laemmle hired the British-born James Whale to direct for him. Whale arrived in the US in the early 1910s and began working in theater before moving to Hollywood in the 1930s. He's best known for his Frankenstein films, Frankenstein, The Bride of Frankenstein, and Son of Frankenstein, and his signature style that blended horror, dark humor, and very moody visuals. Whale was also openly gay in an era when that was unheard of, and his direction of the Frankenstein films explores being othered and rejected by society, as the novel explores the quest for identity and the desire for acceptance. Now, when we talk about Frankenstein, we all have an image of the creature in our minds, but Shelley herself didn't give us much. He was described in the novel as being 8 feet tall, and, from Shelley, his limbs were in proportion, and I had selected his features as beautiful. His yellow skin scarcely covered the work of muscles and arteries beneath. His hair was of a lustrous black and flowing, his teeth of a pearly whiteness. But these luxuriances only formed a more horrid contrast with his watery eyes that seemed almost of the same color as the dun-white sockets in which they were set, his shriveled complexion, and straight black lips. Pretty gruesome, but yellow, not green skin? Jack Pierce, the makeup designer, painted Boris Karloff's face grayish green because of the film being shot using orthochromatic film, also known as black and white, which would make colors like red or pink turn to dark gray. Pierce collaborated with Karloff on the look and chose the paint that he did to make Karloff appear more ghostly on screen. He did eventually copyright the look. But why did green become the color we associate with the creature? Now, this is a bit of a theory, but the original poster, illustrated by Caroli Gross, has a yellowish theme, but also notes of green with green lettering. Between that and the knowledge that the paint Pierce used was grayish green, perhaps that's why we all imagine the creature as green. You can find out more about the Frankenstein films on our big screen and in the program. Now, to turn to another side of film history. I'm sure many of you have seen the 1974 classic Young Frankenstein. Both the lobby and the program have great information about the film, but let's talk about the two people responsible for Young Frankenstein coming to be, Mel Brooks and Gene Wilder. The pair met in 1963 when Gene Wilder was on Broadway in a production of Mother Courage and Her Children with Anne Bancroft, who was soon to wed Mel Brooks. Brooks invited Wilder to join them on vacation, and he gave Wilder the first 30 pages of a movie called Springtime for Hitler. After he read the pages, Brooks asked Wilder if he would like a part in the movie. Wilder responded, absolutely, and that film became, of course, The Producers. Wilder said, I love acting, especially if it's a fantasy of some kind, not naturalism. I love creating a character in a fantastical situation, like Dr. Frankenstein. Wilder's favorite film he ever made was Young Frankenstein, and his love for those kinds of characters comes through in the film. Mel Brooks and Gene Wilder collaborated often, so it's no surprise that they co-wrote the script for Young Frankenstein, especially as Wilder himself loved writing and wrote several books after he semi-retired from acting. But Wilder, as much as he loved Brooks and working with him, didn't like how much Brooks would break the fourth wall in films. The pair began writing Young Frankenstein when they were working on Brooks' film Blazing Saddles, which Brooks also acted in. When it came to the casting for Young Frankenstein and having Wilder star, Wilder had a pretty major stipulation. He wouldn't act in the film if Brooks did too. Brooks ultimately agreed, but he does have some small sound effect cameos. The pair did occasionally fight on set, but they were good friends who made up quickly. He was a flat-out genius, Brooks said after Wilder's death. He blessed my life with his friendship. Many years later, The Producers became a smash hit on Broadway, followed several years after that by Young Frankenstein. So now, let's talk about this production you're about to see today. This is a co-production, or a tri-pro, with Berkshire Theatre Group and Bay Street Theatre. Over the past several seasons, Geva, along with many other theaters in the country, have been doing co-pros as it benefits all of us in terms of cost and resource sharing. For this production, we're partnering with theaters who do what we call summer stock. The dictionary definition of that is theatrical productions by a company organized for the summer season, especially at vacation resorts or in a suburban area. The Berkshires are a big vacation spot for BTG, and Bay Street is in the Hamptons, both prime territories for a summer stock theater. Bay Street is not officially a summer stock, as they have programming throughout the year, but they have a separate summer lineup. Berkshire Theatre Group, however, is called the ultimate summer theater. I mention summer stocks because they are such an important aspect of the theater industry, as they represent a training ground for the next generation of theater makers. Plenty of actors get their start at summer stocks in small roles, as well as members of the administrative and production staff who get a lot of hands-on training by spending a summer in a beautiful location and working to produce several shows in a short span of time. Plenty of members of Geva's staff have gotten their starts at summer stocks. Director and choreographer Gerry McIntyre of Young Frankenstein used the concept of Stuart Ross for this production, but of paying homage to the Universal Monsters franchise that we spoke of earlier. You'll see references to the monster films of the era throughout, in many ways the same as you do in the film version of Young Frankenstein. The designers all knocked it out of the park for that concept, and the actors are having such fun on stage. Plenty of them grew up memorizing Mel Brooks comedies, and it shows in their performances. Before I leave you today, I want to share this quote from Shelley's Frankenstein that, at least out of context, reminds me a lot about what we do in the theater. Invention, it must be humbly admitted, does not consist in creating out of void, but out of chaos. The materials must, in the first place, be afforded. It can give form to dark, shapeless substances, but cannot bring into being the substance itself. To me, it's the audience that brings into being the substance of the art of theater. We're so looking forward to welcoming you to the theater and having you join us in the Wilson for Young Frankenstein. Thank you so much for joining me.